أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
And the last thing I'll say is Americans, because they live in such a peaceful, happy country whose power is unquestioned, they have no imagination for how things can get worse. They have known about this since the end of the Second World War, which ended in 1945. Been a huge increase during as well, huge increase in UFO sightings, in UFO crashes, et cetera, and it turns out the federal government has been tracking this for 80 years and lying about it. So why? Well, that's a great question and I can't answer it. I have theories, but I don't know. But here's what I learned. The first question is this real? Or am I just being a crazy person who's spending too much time on the internet? Well, this summer, we got a call. We didn't reach out. This person called us. Lexi, who's standing right there, who's a genius, one of our producers, gets this call from this guy who's a tenured Stanford medical school professor, and he wants to come on the show. Now, this guy has a couple patents, and so he's rich. And he's got tenure at one of the most prestigious schools in the world. So, he's not a flake. He comes on, and he's like, 11 years ago, the U.S. government reached out to me because I'm an expert on head injuries, on brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, as a physician, and they had all these court cases from families of U.S. servicemen, over 100, who'd been by UFOs. And the Department of Defense was refusing to give them benefits or medical benefits. And I'm like, and he's like, so they're in the courts. And I was like, there are over 100 servicemen by UFOs? Like, what? He's like, yeah, and there are court cases about it. I'm like, why isn't this on the front page of the New York Times? I don't know. But he goes, I'm involved in it. I'm one of the researchers. I'm the expert witness in these cases. What does that mean? And he's like, for example, UFOs appear to be attracted, for whatever reason, to nuclear energy. So at nuclear missile bases in the upper Midwest, for example, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered submarines are all getting buzzed by these objects, including underwater. And in a number of cases, these things have landed on military bases, including famously in Germany, in West Germany in the 70s. And servicemen have approached them. Like, what is this thing? There's this giant glowing thing on the base. And they approach and they get traumatic brain injury. They are rendered. They get brain damage. And he studied their brains. And this is all totally real. This is the Department of Defense, dude. And they've all had this damage from some kind of powerful energy that we cannot identify. So then this guy's like, wow, he's just a scientist. He never believed in UFOs. He's like, this is real. I cannot believe this is real. This is crazy. He should do research on it. He's still at Stanford.
To that, and there is a well-known story in the Surah, and that the Jinn had killed him because of what he had done. But pouring boiled water in such holes or sinks or drainage to open it, a number of scholars from the Salaf stated that one should not do this without saying Bismillah.
The most interesting from my perspective, I don't know if it's a consensus, but a lot of people, serious people, not crazy people, who study this stuff, U.S. government employees, seem to believe that these objects are coming from under the oceans. So the conventional view is they're coming in from outer space. There's not actually a lot of, something enters the atmosphere, we can see it on satellite, and there's not any evidence of that, actually. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's happening, but we don't know that it is. There's a lot of evidence these things are coming out of the ocean, including videotape of these objects coming out of the water at high speed, or even more amazing, descending at Mach 3 into the water. Then we have a huge submarine fleet, American, but also Chinese and Russian, underwater with pretty sensitive measurement devices, sonar, etc. And they have recorded these objects doing hundreds of knots underwater. There is, I want to restate, videotape of these objects of unknown origin hitting the water and disappearing and then coming out of the water.
وأنا لمسنا السماء فوجدناها ملئت حرسا شديدا وشهبا.
By the way, there was just last week I spoke to a member of Congress about this who was on a military base in the state of Florida, where they showed him images of 4 of these things that, like a Raptor pilot, some American fighter pilot, took these images of these objects right next to his plane. But here's the most interesting thing. They got a thermal read on him. They measure heat. That's one of the ways that, we get a heat imprint. Like if we have a thermal optic, I can see the heat coming off your body. That's how we see things at night. The thermal imaging of this showed the heat at the bottom of the object and not at the top. And as the commanding general said to this member of Congress, he's like, that doesn't make any sense, because heat does what? It rises. So you don't ever see a thermal image of anything with the heat at the bottom. The heat's at the top. It's cool at the top, hot at the bottom? How does that work? If I put a cigarette lighter under my hand, where's the hot part?
وَالْجَانَّ خَلَقْنَاهُ مِن قَبْلُ مِن نَّارِ السَّمُومِ.
There's a huge amount of evidence in the archaeological record that these things have been around since the beginning of recorded history. The references to them. The star over Bethlehem may be one of them. Here's what I really think. I think I don't know. And I think that wise people understand the limits of their knowledge and of their perception. Stop pretending that we're God. We're not.
A researcher named Jim Allison noticed that a significant number of ancient sites around the world, some of the oldest, most mysterious structures, all line up on a single circle around the Earth, a straight line. When you put a 2-day orbit over this exact place, it's not an exact circle. It's got slightly a potato chip shape to it, but it lines up pretty closely. Let's hop aboard a 2-day orbit satellite and take a tour of all these ancient sites. We start over the most famous megalithic site, the Great Pyramids, with their mysterious chambers, hidden tunnels, and of course the Sphinx. A little bit later, we cross the Sahara, we cross the Atlantic Ocean, we cross over the Amazon basin, and we come to Machu Picchu with its mysterious stone structures, and Ollantaytambo, and all the other ancient sites around Cusco. Then we fly past the plain of Nazca with its mysterious etched drawings in the floor of the desert. Of course, we're 60,000 kilometers up, so if we want to see those shapes, we got to have a pretty good telescope. We keep going across the Pacific. 4,000 kilometers, we cross directly over Easter Island with its gigantic heads, the Moai figures. Actually, they're full figures that are buried down into the ground. Continuing on across the Pacific, we come back up over the equator, we fly up over Cambodia and the ancient temples of Preah Vihear and Angkor Wat. Continuing on up into Asia, we fly over India to Pakistan, to the site of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the oldest Western civilization locations, with its script that has still not been decoded because it's so old and remote from us. We continue on over the Middle East, past Persepolis, and the great buildings at Ur, and then we continue on over Petra with its amazing stone structures dug into the walls, and then it brings us back to the Great Pyramids, right where we started. So obviously not all ancient sites are on this circle. Stonehenge, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, all sorts of sites in China, Africa, Asia, Central America. And I find it has a number of really interesting and unusual properties. One, the orbit stays outside of the Van Allen belts, the radiation belts that are out around here around the Earth. And if you're an astronaut, you don't want to hang out in there, you can fly through it, but you don't want to be there. If you're electronics, you don't want to be in there either. You want to stay outside of them. So this orbit is outside of that.
وَأَنَّا لَمَسْنَا السَّمَاءَ فَوَجَدْنَاهَا مُلِئَتْ حَرَسًا شَدِيدًا وَشُهُبًا.
Second feature, it's also outside of the Earth's magnetic field all the time. So the magnetic field is inside of you. Third feature, it's always in the sun. It's an orbit that never crosses into the Earth's shadow that's streaming away, even at the northern solstice, the most extreme tilt of the northern hemisphere. So,
وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا
the sites that are on the circle have a lot of things in common. One, they have some of the largest stonework humans have ever done. Huge blocks that we wouldn't realistically try to move today. Two, the style of the stonework is precisely cut. They fit together. You cannot fit a knife blade in between some of these rocks. And then look at Easter Island in specific. The big moai figures get most of the attention. There's hundreds of them. But there are also walls that appear to be some of the oldest things on Easter Island, made by humans. The walls are made of basalt, an extremely hard stone. They match the style of construction at Machu Picchu, 4,000 kilometers away across the Pacific, also made of basalt. Then there's these mysterious knobs and scoops. Many on the pyramids, other Egyptian sites, many all over South America. What are those knobs for? How were they made? Why did they go to the effort of putting that in? We don't know. The scooping, it looks like it was mashed potatoes and somebody came along with a trowel and just scooped out the rock. We don't know. Then there's the precision stonework, perfectly flat surfaces, things that you would take to a machine shop and they would grind with diamond. We can't figure out how this could have been done with bronze or iron tools. Okay, want to get a little bit weirder? There are cultures around the world that have the bird man, the fish man. Asia's got them, South America's got them, and they have this other feature, the handbag of the gods. Why? How? All around the world. The handbag of the gods is also found in India and Indonesia, and most recently at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which has been buried for 10,000 years at least, which means the handbag has been around for at least that time. It wasn't added by people later on. Okay, now I'm not here to invoke ancient astronauts or space aliens. To me, that doesn't answer anything. It's like putting a bumper sticker on it, but I want to read the book. Where did all this come from?
ولقد فتنا سليمان وألقينا على كرسيه جسدا ثم أناب قال رب اغفر لي وهب لي ملكا لا ينبغي لأحد من بعدي إنك أنت الوهاب فسخرنا له الريح تجري بأمره رخاء حيث أصاب والشياطين كل بناء وغواص وآخرين مقرنين في الأصفاد هذا عطاؤنا فامنن أو أمسك بغير حساب
13,000 years ago, there was a more advanced form of human civilization. How advanced is hard to say, but we know they could do stuff with stone that we really cannot.
You disbelievers are like those before you. They were stronger than you in power and more abundant in wealth and children. They enjoyed their portion of worldly enjoyment, and you have enjoyed your portion as those before you enjoyed their portion, and you have engaged in vanities like that in which they engaged. It is those whose deeds have become worthless in this world and in the hereafter, and it is they who are the losers.
And then what happened? Suddenly, there was a catastrophe. Something terrible happened. The oceans rose, temperatures dropped, populations were wiped out, cities were abandoned. Time goes by, civilization recovers, we get into hunter-gatherer mode, we get into agriculture, city-states. Okay, so it's a story, right? It's a good story? Maybe, maybe not. But what does the science tell us? Well, to begin with, we have great data showing the oceans were 100 meters lower 15,000 years ago. 100 meters, 330 feet. That means the ancient coastlines and islands are now completely submerged. Secondly, Greenland ice cores and mid-Atlantic sediment samples show us that there was a sudden drop in temperature, and it lasted for 1,000 years or so around the world. Thirdly, the male DNA has clues. Around the world, the diversity of the male DNA drops precipitously, again, around 13,000 years ago. It wasn't just here or there, it was around the world. A lot of men were not passing on their DNA to future generations. That declined, and then it began to recover.
Has there not reached them the news of those before them? The people of Noah and the tribes of Ad and Thamud and the people of Abraham and the companions of Madian and the towns overturned. Their messengers came to them with clear proofs, and Allah would never have wronged them, but they were wronging themselves.
فقلنا اذهبا إلى القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا فدمرناهم تدميرا وقوم نوح لما كذبوا الرسل أغرقناهم وجعلناهم للناس آية وأعتدنا للظالمين عذابا أليما وعادا وثمود وأصحاب الرس وقرونا بين ذلك كثيرا وكلا ضربنا له الأمثال وكلا تبرنا تتبيرا ولقد أتوا على القرية التي أمطرت مطر السوء.
So what could have happened that could explain all of these things? Well, we have evidence that something hit North America, a comet or a meteorite. It left very distinctive particles all over the hemisphere. It set a lot of stuff on fire because there's very distinctive soot and ash particles found right there as well. We have seen 500,000 impact craters, ranging from New Jersey all the way down to Alabama, like a giant cosmic shotgun blast hit our planet.
أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير.
One of my heroes, Carl Sagan, reminds us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. To that I would add that extraordinary evidence deserves extraordinary investigation. And I'm quite certain that if we use our science and our human best thinking abilities and we do the hard work and spend the money, find the answers, we're going to learn more about who we are, where we came from, and where we might be able to go.
A human being, regardless of who they are, or where they are, or what they do, will have this curiosity. They'll want to know, why am I here? How did I get here? And do I have a purpose? And if so, what is it? The only one who would really be able to answer that question would be the Creator Himself. If there is a Creator, it would be up to Him to tell us why we were created and what He expects from us and what this life is really about. Allah has shown the people from the time of Adam until right now, has shown the people what He wants from them. And it's a very simple thing, and that is that worship be for Him alone without any partners. In fact, we know this life to be a test from Almighty God. That's why we're born, and that's why we die, because there has to be a beginning and an end for us to be tested on. The next life, after this life, no one will ever die again. A bad person or a good person. Both are brought back and they continue to live in the next life, either in good shape or not so good shape, depending on how they did on the test. The worship of the God of Abraham, that was what was taught by these prophets.
The Lord of the Arsh and Kursi. We're talking about the Lord of the worlds. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We're talking about the Lord of the entire universe and beyond. The entire universe and beyond. You know, we live in this dunya. And we are fascinated with this dunya which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed has created in a beautiful manner. We're fascinated. There are over billions of people which live on this dunya at this moment in time. Over 6 billion people that live on the dunya at this moment in time. This dunya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so big that there is space in this dunya for billions and billions and billions or more people. But what is this dunya in comparison to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created out there? This dunya is insignificant. This dunya is meaningless to Allah. It means nothing. It is worthless. So worthless, compare it with the sun. The sun is one star. You know more science than me. You'll be able to tell me better. Take this planet Earth and you place it inside the sun, and you will be able to place 1.3 million Earths in the sun. 1.3 million Earths in the sun. Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. The sun is one star. One star. There are stars out there which are millions of times bigger than the sun. You tell me this, that you need millions and millions of stars to make one galaxy. And then you tell me this, that there are zillions of galaxies out there. Let me tell you on top of this, my friend, after this, whatever you see above, when you raise your head and you look above, whatever you see above, the zillions and zillions and zillions of galaxies, let me tell you, this is everything there is within the first heaven. Everything there is within the first heaven, and Allah is the creator of 7 heavens. 7 heavens. And the distance between the first heaven and the second heaven is 500 years. You know, the distance that can be covered in 500 years, at what speed? Only Allah knows. Only Allah knows. But it will take 500 years to get from the first heaven to the second heaven. 500 years from the second to the third, third to the fourth, fourth to the fifth, fifth to the sixth, sixth to the seventh. Every time it will take 500 years. After the 7 heavens, وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. You all read the Ayatul Kursi. You all know the Ayatul Kursi. After this, you have the Kursi of Allah. You have the chair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know these 7 heavens that we've just talked about, in comparison to the Kursi of Allah, they're non-existent. They're meaningless. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given an example in a hadith, just to give us a little bit of understanding with regards to the 7 heavens in comparison to the Kursi of Allah. Take a ring from your finger, take it off, the small ring that you have, and place it, let's say, in a desert, the Sahara Desert. It's the biggest desert in the world. You know that ring that we take off from our fingers and place it in the Sahara Desert? What comparison is in between the ring and the Sahara Desert? Nothing. Nothing. The 7 heavens is the ring, and the Kursi of Allah is the Sahara Desert. After the Kursi of Allah, you have the Arsh of Allah. وَكَانَ أَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ. You have the Arsh of Allah. Again, Rasulullah has explained, so just so that we can understand. Take the ring, place it in the desert. This time, the ring is the Kursi and the Arsh is the desert. What is the Kursi in comparison to the Arsh of Allah? Nothing. Then you have angels which carry the Arsh of Allah. Their heads are in the 7th heaven and their feet are in the lowest earth. My friends, then you have the Lord of the Arsh al-Kursi. لا تدركه الأبصار ويدرك الأبصار وهو اللطيف الخبير. He is beyond the size of Allah, who Allah is, what Allah is. The greatness of Allah is beyond the comprehension of my little mind. This is the being that you and I are messing with.
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم